the debate or the discussion around Kenya's opposition?
First of all, I think the movement by politicians is exclusive of the movement that happened last year. Young people came to the ground, the Gen Zs, the millennials, the fighting last year. And by the way, it's important that we contextualize this. That if you look at the civic space last year, it was too much about issues. People walked away from politics of identity. By identity here, I mean that even as we spoke here, you had people talk about Western. I mentioned Western. He spoke about Central. For the longest time, our politics have been politics of identity. We as the Muslim community, we as Christians, we as the people from Northeastern, it's about an identity. We as people from this region, so it's about regionalism, whatever cultural, religious aspirations people have, or other inclination they do have, ethnicity and stuff. If you look at the civic space last year, it made politicians who actually have thrived around the politics of identity lose foothold completely. And then what happened is that then politicians congregated on one side and the people on the other side. So the movement by the people is still on. That has not been impeached by what you see politicians doing here. What you call, let me say, quote unquote, the Gen Z movement is exclusive of this. Because of all the things they asked for, other than light issues here and there, a majority of those things, they were not even included in government. They were, in any case, they were excluded. So what you see here are politicians trying to come up with the best way of quoting the movement we saw last year. So I would still insist that there's always a first time. I know he insists that normally, and by the way, that is a research that had been done, that Kenyans decide on the president 2 years before an election. That when polled, the person somebody said they will vote for 2 years to an election is always the person, to a large extent, is the person they still vote for when the elections come. There's very little variation. But there is always an exception to every rule. And looking at how this country has actually worked through the last 2 years, you can actually realize, like for example, who believed that anyone will actually mobilize as many people as we saw in the streets without having a political figurehead? Ordinarily, that was a preserve for Raila Odinga. The person who would bring masses to the streets was Raila Odinga. Do you know who brought the people to the streets of Nairobi last year? You can't pinpoint. You do not know. So that, they took away the carpet from under Raila's feet. So we can therefore not stick. Let's stop conditioning the masses to think in a certain way. And that is, by the way, what the politicians are doing. That you see, and we in the media are also helping them do that. But okay, now we already are mentioning names and conditioning them to start thinking about that. And that is why I say that is exceptionalism. If it's
these ones have offered themselves. Yes. We can only talk about the reality.
No, that's where we are. But we are insisting that if somebody has not shown up this year, then they might not be of consequence when it comes to 2027, and that is actually what I'm disabusing. That if you look at last year, you can therefore not argue that it has to go a certain way. And for me, I think we are losing the big point, especially for the DAP housewarming. What the former DP said there is something that we should be focusing on. Number one, Rigathi Gachagua impeached the bottom-up economic plan that the government is running. He completely destroyed it. He impeached it, because he destroyed the foundations and the anchors of that plan. Realistically, government needs to come out, UD and both, government needs to actually come out and respond to that. Because if you look at the flagship projects, he dismissed them. Said if it's about affordable housing, he said it's not about the houses or the jobs. He said it's about supplying material to the manufacturers doing that. That is impeaching a plan. It's a serious allegation. And by the way, whether Rigathi Gachagua is healing or not, whether he is a jilted lover or not, whether he is hurting or not, the allegations he made are, for me, the most damning revelations. And if Parliament really needs to redeem itself, they should actually ask him to actually come up and shed a light. Because apart from impeaching the plan, he spoke about, look at all the flagship projects, SHA, or rather the affordable housing, health, literally everything. He reigned on the main pillars that hold that plan and said those were just commercial interests for other people. Number two, he raised a very serious issue of state capture, that the president is a captive of commercial interests of some 2 individuals that he mentioned. So, and he made it look like exactly what the Guptas were doing in South Africa. That is a serious allegation. So while we are here arguing about opposition and whatever, I think the content of his speech Because, by the way, he has got his Article 38 rights of political association and being part and parcel of anyone.
We've had those conversations before, but it depended on who was saying it.
And
is it the fact that he is saying it and he was a former deputy?
And you know why that is important? When the alligator comes out of water one morning and tells you the crocodile is dead, Fred, you don't live in water. You cannot doubt the alligator. So those allegations are damning.
The other analogy I want to add to, today Maliba is doing the Lord's work.
He's injecting.
When the crocodile comes out and tells you the hippopotamus is sick, comes out of the water, you don't doubt that. You don't go into the water to confirm. It is not upon us as Kenyans to question whether what Rigathi Gachagua is saying is true about the government, about state capture, about corruption, about organized, budgeted corruption. We do not have to question that because we know that the services that we are receiving today are well undercut. So